Good evening, everyone. Hello, Pradeep. Hello, Priyanka. So, today our session is all about driving customer centricity for a better outcome for business, customers, and the world. This session is hosted by MRSI in collaboration with Borderless Access to commemorate the International Market Research Day, which falls on May 2nd. So globally, ESOMAR provides a platform for research and insights industry organizations to host a series of events on a common theme and a universal theme. So for 2023, the theme is Research for a Better World, and this session is part of that series. So being customer focused or customer centric seems to be one of the core values of almost all companies. But is being customer focused or customer centric one and the same thing? Let's try and find out more with our elite panel. We have BV Pradeep. Pradeep has been a prominent figure in the global market research and insights industry for over 3 decades. He has served as president of MRSI for 6 years. He's been a vice president at ESOMAR and has also served 6 years in ESOMAR's governing council. Pradeep was the global vice president for CMI at HUL and Unilever for over 2 decades. And he's a pioneer in embedding customer centricity at the heart of Unilever, and is really passionate about this particular subject. Priyanka Bhargav, she's a senior director for marketing and strategy at Flipkart. Priyanka represents the voice of the customer for all of Flipkart's brands, which includes ClearTrip, Shopsy, Myntra, and Health Plus. Priyanka was earlier with Tata Docomo and Jet Airways and also worked with Kantar and Nielsen in her initial years. Priyanka is a champion for segmentation and brand equity, and her papers on segmentation have been recognized by ESOMAR and MRSI. So thank you, Pradeep, and thank you, Priyanka, for joining us for this session today. Really grateful and really nice of you to take out the time. We just mentioned just once, and you all both agreed to be part of it. So thanks.
Thank you. Thank you for having us. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, Ruchika.
Yeah. So we'll get right into it. Pradeep, like I mentioned earlier, customer centricity and customer focus is sometimes just interchanged with one another. So could you elaborate and just share with us what is the core difference between the two? And why is customer centricity so important?
Absolutely. I think I would start off saying that customer focus is almost a non-negotiable critical element for any business if it has to grow and thrive. Yeah. So it is a sufficient but not a complete condition for success. One of the things I would say is it's an initial good step to have. Without that, of course, you can't do anything about consumer centricity. Typically, consumer centricity looks at a much more holistic perspective of the consumer, a view about their whole life and how they go about living it and what their needs could be. Whereas in a customer focus, when we talk about customer focus, we are probably talking about most of the time about looking at the needs, the benefits which consumers are wanting, and some of the features or attributes which consumers are looking at from a product or a service perspective. So it's very close to what we are delivering and see how we can improve that and make it better. It's often seen as the responsibility of marketing and sales people in an organization to do that, and the rest of the organization just follows after that. However, we all know as marketers that consumers are not living their lives just to consume our products, whether it's a soap or a soup or a refrigerator or a car, right? They have their life, they have their aspirations, ambitions, stress points, and they are trying to see how products can help them to achieve certain objectives which they have. So each product does a certain job to be done in their life. And so to that extent, for example, if a skin cream is being used by a person, it's because they want to look good and present themselves in a way to the external world which gets a positive affirmation. And that's the job it's doing. Now, there could be other solutions at play which can compete with it. So looking at it from a holistic perspective then brings across a different mindset of how we can support consumers. And also, one of the things is consumer centricity helps to bring in new ideas and things beyond the immediate product. So it's a great way of engaging with consumers in a holistic way. And it's also typically done at an organization level, because it's not just about one. You can say I'm customer focused, but then customer centricity brings in an organization level connect, which has huge benefits for today's business and also the business for tomorrow.
Okay, so Pradeep, do you have a success story or something where you can show the benefit of having run the customer centricity program at Unilever? So some stories.
Yeah, sure, Ruchika. I think when you said what's the benefit of a consumer centricity program, I was just reminded of an anecdote which happened in HUL. This is literally 20 plus years ago, when Keki Dadiseth, who was the chairman at that time, asked me to see how we can set up a program to bring consumer into the hearts and minds of people in the organization. And so I came up with this plan called Consumer Windows. And it was, and I was trying to present to everyone to convince them of the concept that they should all be meeting with consumers. And so there was this huge R&D team when I was presenting. And suddenly one of the R&D managers stood up and said, Pradeep, can I ask a question? I said, yes. And then he said, Pradeep, I thought you were appointed as the head of market research and insight to give us the insights. And now I see that you have come up with this mega plan to make us all work for you to get hold of the insight. I was really stunned by his question because I didn't expect that. And I was caught off guard, and I had to think on my feet for an answer. And then I asked him, can I tell you something, that if tomorrow you want to recruit somebody in R&D, and I will give you all the CVs, detailed CVs of all the potential candidates, but I'll not allow you to interview them, but you have to make a choice as to whom you're going to choose for the department. He said, no, how is that possible? You need to talk to people, you need to get a feel for the personality, their communication skills, and their whole, you need a feel of the person. I said, that's exactly the point. While you are so worried about recruiting one person for the department, you want to meet them. But when you are selling and making products which go to millions of consumers, and you are basing that entirely on my market research report, which is the equivalent of a CV, it's a summary, and then you don't want to meet even a few consumers. And I'm not asking you to meet hundreds of them, just 5, 6. And that's when the penny dropped for people that this is so important. And there was a moment where the thing flipped into everybody was so passionate about it. And I think when you ask about from a business point of view, the actual benefit, one of the things that we in organizations struggle with is how do you get an organization to respond to a consumer need? It's not about 1 or 2 people blowing the trumpet and saying that, oh, we need to do that. That's what sales and marketing people tend to do. This is for the customer, this is important, we need to change, etc. However, the organization is at a standstill. They are saying, oh, no, I don't think we are geared for it, we should not be moving. So how do you get an organization level movement in order to respond fast? So the essential thing is, if you connect the entire organization in a consumer-centric way, the response of the organization is much faster. You don't have people in the rest of the organization dragging their feet when something urgent needs to be done. And in the consumer-centric program, of course, there are sales, marketing, and R&D teams which are very close to consumers. They understand the consumer in depth. But there should be a sensitivity for people in finance, IT, supply chain, etc., on what's going on, because then they can understand if something is explained to them. I remember when we did this consumer-centric exercise and we went and met consumers, there was one of the financial controllers who had no idea about the consumer thing. But he went on this trip and he met some consumers, especially from lower income groups. And then after the meeting, his attitude towards this thing completely changed. And in fact, he was telling marketing people, when you take up prices for sachets, shampoo sachets, etc., don't do that because these people can't afford it. We have to make up the bottom line somewhere else. We just can't take up prices like that. So I was sitting in the meeting and looking at, wow, that's a big change. Somebody who was insisting on gross margins, etc. So this kind of major change in the attitude of people within the organization can be brought about with consumer centricity.
Yep. Thank you, Pradeep. So this entire program of customer centricity started in HUL and Unilever, what, about 2 decades ago?
Yeah, I can elaborate that a little more if you want to now, but or a little.
Or maybe, yeah, I will ask you again. So the reason I was asking is, two decades ago, Flipkart didn't even exist. So, so Priyanka is going to tell us where, they have to move so much more faster and agile. And she comes from the e-commerce, represents the e-commerce world, where your touch points with the consumer is all digital. So, Priyanka, why don't you tell us on what is your journey or path as far as customer centricity at Flipkart is concerned? How are you all tackling it?
Sure, sure. First of all, thank you so much for having me here, Ruchika. Super excited to be part of this panel next to Pradeep, talking to you and talking to everybody on the virtual bridge as of today. When I joined e-commerce, which was Flipkart Group, almost about 8 years now. 8 years back when I joined them, I realized that a lot of my learning is coming in from a lot of offline market research work that I had done. However, when I joined Flipkart Group, and that was back in Myntra, I was 5 years with Myntra before moving into the Flipkart Group 4 years back, 3 years back rather. I realized that I had to unlearn a lot of my offline market research learning and adapt to a lot of online virtual methodologies, techniques. And there was a point in time, and I wouldn't be exaggerating if I were to say this, that I was falling short of partners in the ecosystem who could run as fast or move at the same pace at which e-commerce was moving and is still moving, right? And hence we took on the mantle that that's not a problem. We will work with a lot of partners in the ecosystem. We will learn in the process, we will make mistakes, but this is a very interesting cusp of where offline meets the digital market research techniques, and research here will be able to therefore answer a lot of the questions which the virtual lot of data crunching work that we do a lot of clickstream behavioral data analysis, still not able to answer the real why behind a certain behavior that a customer exhibits on the platform. So hence, in the last 8 years, I also had the interesting opportunity to not only learn from a lot of our seniors in terms of what the FMCG companies were doing, what other offline companies were doing in terms of bringing in customer centricity within the organization. Yet at the same time, I think we also created or reshaped customer centricity, and had to, because that was the call of the hour, to also suit and adapt to the environment that Flipkart was in, or e-commerce is in particularly. So I can talk about a lot of interesting exercises that we undertook, wherein the inspiration was from offline, but we started to bring in a lot of amalgamation in terms of a learning from the virtual world. But let me take 2 steps back, Ruchika, and also talk about as to why this was needed, because just understanding the core reasons for becoming customer centric is very, very important here. Now, if you realize there are about 700 to about 800 million internet users in this country, we are all aware of that number. It's anywhere between 600 to 800 million, depending upon the source that you pick up. Now, within that number, we have about 300 odd million e-commerce users, people who would have at least shopped on e-commerce, e-tail, at least once in their lifetime. If 300, 350 million is the number, 700 million, 750 million is the internet user. Almost about 40% of the internet users are on e-commerce. But there is a huge gap of that customer base which has never used e-tail to their advantage. Now, if you were to juxtapose our current situation of 350 million versus 700 million internet user, to say China, we realize that we are about where China used to be 10 years back. So 10 years back, China had this kind of a gap of about 40 to 45% between e-tail versus internet users. And we realized and we learned and we studied a lot of consumer behavior back in China as well. Though it's a different topic for a different day, that China and Chinese markets don't behave similar to how India and vice versa. India is a very unique market, but there's obviously a lot of learning one can pick up. We realized
Sure.
that with this kind of a gap between the e-tail versus internet, it was a very fertile ground for a lot of innovation. And when that innovation happened on the back of a lot of customer centric practices which were brought in by various players into the market. So a lot of these popular players, I don't need to name, but many of these lot of players, they actually adapted to a lot of customer centric practices to understand what should ideally be done in a very different way in order to onboard a lot more internet users onto e-tail. Now, a lot of these practices could be related to personalization, identifying the high value action items, showcasing and demonstrating what the customer is looking for, understanding very clearly that there is a change in the life stage. Say, for example, Ruchika all this while was probably shopping for larger appliances, electronics, mobile, but one day she shopped for diapers. Yeah, which is an indication that there is a change in her life stage, and if there is a
Sure.
change in the life stage with that one little step, which means this is just the right point for me to be able to showcase, upsell, cross sell various other related categories of, say, baby care and various other personal care, etc. So there were a lot of these innovations which were brought about. And now, cutting back to where India is as of today, India is at that cusp of a lot of innovation that you will see in the market. And a lot of this innovation, and I'm very happy and very glad to make this observation that within Flipkart itself, at least in the last almost a decade, we have really brought about a lot of change to become a more customer centric, more customer obsessed as an organization. Reason being that if we were to not do a lot of those innovations, it will be very difficult to onboard customers in a trust deficit country like ours, wherein every time there is a communication is being thrown to a customer, it is met with a lot of apprehension. Yeah, customers tend to rationalize, they speak to people, they take recommendations, etc. And recommendations come freely and easily in the country, even if you have used may not have used the product or the platform. Now, in a scenario like that, unless you go to the customer, speak to the customer, understand, and then part of it is rationalization, but really actually what the customer is behaving, how did some of the triggers which help change customers' behavior in the past, unless you read that, understand that, you will never be able to bring in that behavioral change. And let me give you one small example and a very interesting one. Every time we would speak to a customer that we see you browsing, because obviously we have a lot of customer digital footprint on the platform. We see you browsing but you don't shop. What are the reasons? What should one do or the platform should do so that the customer comes and shops, right? And the customer will always rationalize and give you a response that oh, I was looking for something, I did not find that product, or I found the product but I found the prices somewhere else. Hey, I found the product as well as the prices, but I don't have a salesperson to guide me whether am I making the right choice, etc., so on and so forth. And the list would be endless, and absolutely nothing wrong with that. And then one fine day we launch a brand called Shopsy, yeah, which is a hyper value product and a platform wherein you will get products at rupee 1, rupee 5, rupee 55, rupee 45, etc. A lot of these personal care, home care products can be easily made available. And we realized that we actually became the number one downloaded app in the next 2 months, 3 months, and we continued to top the charts. Now, that is where our entire analyzing of the consumer behavior and being very, very customer focused in terms of also reading in between the lines as to what actually customers said and what was the customer need gap which existed, which is access to some very affordable selection which was not available to the SEC-B, SEC-C customers, because most of the platforms are catering to SEC A1, A2, A3, operating at average selling prices of 1,500, 2,000, 3,000, which a normal Bharat Janta will not like to take the risk in his or her first purchase. But moment you
Right.
launch something at rupee 5, you're really marginalizing the risk, and you're giving a platform to the customer to try a product, try a platform for the first time, and just making it far more accessible, democratizing e-tail to the larger audience in the country. So multiple such examples, Ruchika, some very
So,
interesting ones, but we'll walk you through some of
yeah.
those examples as we continue to
So,
converse. Yeah,
yeah. So, Priyanka, what I wanted to understand was you said you had to unlearn some of the offline learnings and adapt them to in the online department. So, uh, would you give examples of particular kind of work that you adapted? Or I'm just trying to understand whether so this a lot of your understanding and of the customers related to their basket or buying behavior, and which is primarily your motivation in terms of getting customers to come onto your platform and make their purchases. But is there even so one was about what were those methodologies that you kind of adapted? That was one question. And second is, in terms of, do you all have some customer connects like uh, in a digital medium, perhaps across
sure.
the country, like Pradeep was talking about it going across the country, or is it right now limited to the marketing and insights team?
Sure, sure, absolutely. Let me answer the first question first. So, for example, segmentation, as you also read out in my intro, segmentation as the way we know it, customer segmentation, is the way I had learned and I had executed at least the first half of my experience, right? But when I shifted to the e-commerce world, I realized that just an external segmentation, which is going out, talking to the customer, segmenting them on the basis of demographics, behaviors, etc., will not help in the online world. So we created something called a hybrid customer segmentation, wherein we undertook an external segmentation with almost about capturing 45, 47, 50 variables about the customer. But even before we did that, we had a detailed conversation and rounds of conversation with our internal analytics team, which is a custodian of internal customer signals. So we tried understanding that what are the signals with great confidence that we have of these customers, okay? Whether it could be demographics, it could be the kind of products, categories, etc., or even affordability options that they're opting for, etc. If there were 7, 8 of these signals that we had, what we did was we married those 7, 8 signals with the external segmentation. So we did external segmentation, married it with the internal segmentation, and we were able to overlay the external segmentation onto the internal segmentation. Now, what that helped in was internally, if whatever million customers that we had who were probably shopping, say for fashion, yeah, we were able to create 7, 8 such segments. And we were also able to figure out if fashionista was one such customer segment. It is in X million that exists on Flipkart, and what is the penetration percentage of this fashionista in the overall world. So we were able
Okay.
to overlay not only more information, we became far more richer in our understanding of the customer, not only of the internal behavior, because what happens is the more you have internal data to look forward to, you become a slave of the internal data and you start thinking that this customer is the way he or she behaves on the platform, which
Right.
50% of the cases does not happen, right? Because the customer is behaving very differently in the outside world. So this external marrying onto the internal data was a great eye opener for us because it became a source of personalization. It became a source of a lot of cross sell, buy sell interventions. And hence we were able to create a more hybrid variety of segmentation rather than just doing an offline segmentation. Now coming to your second question, Ruchika, which is just like Pradeep mentioned, for us also, in fact, I particularly had a very long conversation with Nitesh before, I was planning on creating a program for Flipkart. But prior to launching KYC is known as Know Your Customer. This is a company-wide KYC customer-centric program that we launched about 3.5 years back.
Okay.
The idea was to democratize insights in Flipkart. So you have a problem, you are designing a product, or you are probably buying a new selection for the customer, or whichever category role that you may be in. You have a problem, talk to the customer. You don't have a problem, still talk to the customer, because you may still understand maybe a need gap which exists, which we are not able to cater to right now. This was a very structured program which was designed around certain number of hours that everybody, every full-time employee, right from CEO onwards, was required to attend every month. There is a KYC certificate which we issue for all the employees. Naturally, if you have not completed certain number of hours or KYC sessions, there are different processes which are put into place to ensure that next month you are able to cover up some of those hours, so that not just you speak to a customer when you have a problem, but customer centricity becomes the part of the DNA of the organization. So it was more of a DNA change, so that customer centricity is not just one a vision statement for the organization, but actually you live it up and you spend time with the customer, and it becomes part of your day-to-day routine that, I'm making a product, I want to talk to the customer first. Customer has to be your first point. And there are various other aspects of KYC which I would like to also speak about. And to conclude this point, is just talking to the customers is not sufficient, right? There is also a closed loop, a step that we have created in KYC, that any insight that you found disruptive or you found new while talking to the customer, you have to document that. And there are certain customer minutes that we have now been able to imbibe within the organization, that whenever the BU heads or the CEO has a conversation with his DRs or with his team, there's certain minutes which are dedicated to the customer minutes, that you undertook KYC sessions, please come share your experiences. That has now kind of 3.5 years down the line has become part of our life.
Thanks, Priyanka. Quite amazing. In fact, I think I can see Pradeep so happy to hear whatever you said, because I'm sure he's. Why don't you share, Pradeep, on how it happened at Unilever all that while ago, and how it's become the currency today, and how it has evolved in the past couple of decades.
What Priyanka said is almost music to my ears. Thanks. That's really great. Now, why I say that is, as I was saying, when in the year 2000 is when the brief came to me to set this up. It looks very old, but I'm taking this as a case study because Hindustan Lever's consumer-centric program is an outstanding success. I would say that I've seen this program globally across, because I used to look after 40 countries for Unilever. It's a remarkable success. And one of the things is, when we started this and set up the program in consumers in year 2000, we gave them, at that time digital was not very advanced, so all of it was either you have to do face-to-face connect with consumers, and then you either do face-to-face situational interviews, or you do a small group chat with a team of our managers actually talking to consumers directly. And so they were recorded and they were analyzed, and so that was the system which was set up. But that was something very new to people. They didn't know how to talk to consumers. So there's a very basic work in terms of what you can say, what you can't say, and what you be sensitive to, etc. And then a couple of years later, when Vindy Banga was the chairman of CEO of Hindustan Lever, he said that you need to build this entirely, embed this in the organization. So he wanted us to create a program called the Feel the Pulse, which we ran for several years, which is basically on 3 days in a year, the whole organization, at that time we had whatever 40,000, 50,000 employees, everybody from the janitor up to this thing will go and meet consumers for three consumers each over 3 days. That 3 days, Hindustan Lever literally shut down. Everybody was going and meeting consumers. And initially, everybody was saying, is this the best use of our time? Is this worth it, etc.? But Vindy was right. The kind of buzz it created, the kind of interactions that happened across managers, because everybody had an experience to share, and there were so many common things, and it suddenly brought the whole thing, consumers at the heart of the organization. And the thing is, Vindy himself, along with his board, went on visits. There were videos of him going, there's conversations, he narrated his experience, and that sort of inspired people to get involved. So what happened as a result was that we went up to every year doing 30,000 consumer connects, all by themselves, managers meeting. And to this day, that 30,000 consumers connects happens every year for the last 22 years. And that Amazing. Is when you know that is when you know that it's now the heart of the organization. I don't think people doing today don't even know when it was started, but that's a part of the ethos, that's a part of the culture that goes in. And of course, Nitesh is trying to raise the bar even further. And the other thing that happened as a result was that Unilever got inspired by this program. The Unilever chairman had come and had taken him around to show him what we do. And he started the program called Reconnect with Consumer. And then along with it, we started a thing called People Voice, which was an initiative to get something similar to Consumer Industry, where facilitates managers to talk to consumers across all the countries of Unilever. And that was a major hit. And I was leading that for a few years in the last decade. And so consumer engagement today is passé, in the sense that people think that, yeah, of course you need to go and meet consumers. But this was not the case. And to Priyanka's point, I think this is not what you used to call it's not consumer tourism. You just go and meet, have a good time and come back. It's about observing what's actually going on, what are the kinds of things, what was different, what was something which was odd, and they note down that, because insight is a very difficult thing to get instantly. But even if you observe some weird things, if you observe something surprising, we were asking managers to note, and that was the thing which Priyanka was referring to, we shared. And then people as a group would say, why is this happening? What's the response we can have? And we would have ideation sessions coming out of it, which everybody shared their experience there, and the group would then put together the ideas. So that's how this whole thing got into the system, because then it connects to the business. See, if you just do consumer connects and come back and everybody goes to sleep, it becomes consumer tourism. Nobody, it will die. It will be seen as a bad experience. Now, at a project level, the success is there are several projects in Unilever which now happen with deep consumer connects. Apart from research, I'm separating research from this thing. Research agencies are formalized, meet some 150 consumers, do with a structured questionnaire, all that kind of thing is fine. This is about the feel. This is the soft part of the consumer data. The hard part comes from research. That's fine. You have to bring those two together, as Priyanka was saying, right? So in that program, I want to quote an example of one of the outstanding successes we have had is Lifebuoy. This was a time when consumer emotions were going up in Unilever, and 20 years ago, Lifebuoy was on its deathbed. Today, it's a global brand. Everybody talks about it. It was on deathbed. It was the biggest country was India, and it was dying. It was declining at 18%. It would have vanished in 2 years. We had to relaunch it. And so we did this program called the Consumer-centric program, which is a Monday to Monday program, where we actually had on a Monday, the whole team would meet with the consumers, and they would talk to them about certain aspects of the brand, their own particular situation, and also share concepts, products, get the reactions. Feedback is then assimilated on Tuesday. Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, you're working through the thing, and sometimes weekends as well. But then we come back with a new concept or a new product or new thoughts and explore on the next Monday. This sequential recycling went on for several weeks until a mix was created, which we were damn sure was so consumer-centric, and so it would be a winner. But we never knew what a mega success it would be. In fact, everybody was skeptical that this brand can ever be revived. And it went from -18 to +20% growth for 3-4 years continuously. And that changed the profile of the brand. And then Unilever started talking about how do we take it to other markets and build the brand globally, etc. So that's the kind of change which can bring about to consumer centricity. It's a very powerful tool, but has to be done with a lot of passion and focus.
Okay, thanks, Pradeep. Before I go to the next question, just a bit of housekeeping. All the viewers who are online, if you have any questions, please post them. There is in the menu, you'll see an area where you can post your questions, and then we'll address it towards the end of the session. So please bring in your questions. So, since our theme is research for a better world, I want to understand, if you can give us examples and show us how customer centricity has helped the organization achieve their sustainability goals, or to create a better world. So some inputs on that. Pradeep, would you like to go first, or Priyanka, would you like to go first?
Yeah, I can go. I think one of the things is when you're discussing the interesting thing here, I'm talking about beyond India into other countries as well. When we were in the UK and then also in the US, when we were doing lots of WhatsApp group chats, etc., on about consumers' lives, we suddenly encountered a lot of themes which were very centric to sustainability. Yeah, this has been happening for a few years, but it's intensely going on. For example, the whole thing to move to naturals, the whole thing to move to eco-friendly products. And you suddenly begin to realize, I was one of those chat groups I was listening to, in the sense, the advantage of WhatsApp, you can look at it between meetings. You don't have to, you are part of the group, but you don't have to read through every time they post, but in between meetings. And one of the interesting things we found was how much intensely consumers were looking for these eco-friendly products, and what kind of networks they had built amongst themselves in friends, etc., where they were exchanging companies which produce these products, etc. And this never gets reported at a very big level, because it's all happening at what you call as a social connectivity level, and there is a little bit of social commerce coming in as well now. It was, so when you're looking at it, there's lots of themes coming up. They're talking about air pollution, they're talking about, let's say, packaging waste, they're talking about ocean pollution. They're really concerned about these kind of topics, right, which is harming the environment, etc. And one of the things is picking up from there, you know where the journeys of the consumers are, what kind of solutions, what are they struggling with. And so if we create concepts around that, that will be very helpful. And one of the things which we did, this was some years ago when Unilever still had the laundry business in the US, was partnering with Walmart. We actually produced a detergent product which was a concentrate. And we used to ship a lot of water along with detergent, liquid detergents. And we realized that the eco footprint of the carbon emissions was so high because of that. Because we would ship it to the Walmart warehouses. From there, they would take it to their retail stores, and then consumer would take it to home. And if you calculate the carbon footprint of it, was astonishing. In fact, the partnership helped to reduce that. And in fact, the Walmart CEO went on media live saying that how much of millions of dollars were saved as a result of this. And so that's one thing. And India itself, the one aspect of sustainability is how do you sustain communities and societies. And we look at rural consumers in India, especially women, who didn't have the earning power. This is an initiative which was started around the same time when we did the consumer-centricity program in India, called the Shakti program, which is still running very strongly, and it's now contributing a lot to Hindustan Lever sales from rural point of view. And over 160,000 women are involved in this in terms of covering 18 states, and so almost it's an amazing program where actually these people then become the voice of the consumer to you. And then they also sell products in the way they create a sustainable environment. So you get both ways. You learn from them. Now with digital connectivity and smartphone availability, the Shakti Ammas have become a digital feedback loop of what's actually happening in the most remote villages, which are less than 2,000 people. And so that is consumer insight coming back. And then for them, it's income coming to them, which gets directly credited to the bank accounts now with all the sophisticated digital ecosystem which is there. So it's an amazing way forward. And something like this, I would have thought it would last it for a few years and it would die down. But in fact, the recent thing is that they are stepping it up even further. So so with the digital world coming in very strongly. So
yeah,
I mean, sustainability comes in various forms, and consumer centricity just helps you to be connected more strongly with consumers.
Right. Thanks, Pradeep. And Priyanka, what about you? Would you like to add something on this topic?
Sure. Thanks, Pradeep, for sharing that. Some very, very interesting examples and very inspiring. So we are extremely committed to creating sustainable solutions at the Flipkart Group. And let me share some very interesting example. In fact, a couple of years back, there was a sale. In fact, we still run that sale, which is called the end of reason sale. Now, in end of reason sale, you know exactly what we are asking the customers to do. We are asking customers to come onto the platform, shop for more, shop for design, shop for styles, clothes that you love, etc. However, when we were talking to, through part of the KYC program, etc., when we were talking to the consumers, we realized that, consumers were actually talking about the fact that, there is so much to buy because now there is an accessibility to different diverse styles and designs across the country, which is now made available through the digital platform. But what do I do with my pre-loved clothes? my wardrobes are full, they are falling over in terms of clothes, how much more I would give it to my cousins or sister or maid, house help, etc., so on and so forth. That got us thinking that is there a way Myntra could lead and drive an initiative wherein we pick up the pre-loved clothes of our consumers and give them something called karma points. So depending upon the number of clothes that you give up, you earn karma points. These karma points will then be converted into certain amount of discounts or deals. And then obviously in the upcoming sale, you can use those deals and discount and yet not worry about overloaded wardrobe. And what do we do with the pre-loved clothes? All of these pre-loved clothes that we gathered from our customers, we had a tie-up with a charitable organization called Goonj. And Goonj, as you may, yes, Goonj, as you may hear, they have a very massive network in every nook and cranny of the country. And a lot of these pre-loved clothes, Myntra was involved in ensuring that those clothes get refurbished so that, when they reach the much needy people, they are in the best of the condition. In fact, we drove that with one little customer need to ensure that the customer does not feel guilt and yet is able to enjoy the latest fashion which they can buy on end of reason sale. Now that insight, that customer centric insight, actually led us to create this kind of massive movement which became so huge, Ruchika, that it was actually mentioned as the biggest drive of collecting pre-loved clothes as part of the Limca Book of Records. And
Wow.
Myntra and Goonj, they were ventured into Limca Book of Records for the largest collection of the pre-loved clothes. Absolutely coming in from a customer-centric discussion, creating a very, very sustainable solution, because we also ensured that the clothes get used and reused rather than getting thrown needlessly. So that is one example that that's very close to my heart. Second is something which we're still working on. You would see as, and I'm presuming that most people on this call, they are e-tail shoppers, they buy online, etc. Not only about Flipkart, but a lot of the products that we order online, there is a lot of packaging which
Right.
comes in either paper or plastic or bubble wraps, etc. And which is also a very important need, because if we don't use a bubble wrap, the delicate items might just break and it's a wastage, at both the ends. Having said that, again, I would quote example of Myntra, and Flipkart has also started doing that. 100% recyclable paper packaging is being used now in parts of at least 100% as Myntra and parts of Flipkart, because obviously Myntra provides shoes and footwear which are not breakable, but at least a lot of the products which could be crockery, which could be larger appliances, etc., mobile or electronics, etc., which are prone to breakage during logistics. So we're still trying to figure out solutions around it, but we have taken the great step to ensure that you have the 100% recyclable paper or the green products which are being used for our packaging and the entire logistics that we use for the same. Within the logistics as well, we are committed to the government of India to actually use electronic vehicles so that the carbon emissions are almost zero. We are actually utilizing the EV and the Made in India, Make in India initiative, etc., which also provides a lot of jobs and opportunity. So a lot of these sustainable options, not only coming in terms of the insights coming in from the customer, but also we're making life better at large for an average Indian.
Thank you. That's amazing. So I think at least in the recycle drive, because you all being largely virtual, you would have had to have points of pickup and then manage the logistics, the offline logistics of it all. Yeah.
So when the delivery executive was going to drop the new products, that was the point that he will also pick up the old products. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Interesting. Great. So both of you mentioned that you all had some kind of a mechanism to measure when how managers or leaders across the company, how many customer hours or minutes they were spending. But generally overall, is there a means of measuring customer centricity as such in an organization? Is there a metric that we go with, or is it beyond these hours and numbers that you've done, you feel it's more on the softer or intangible kind of benefits that come in stronger?
I
Pradeep?
think, yeah, I think that's an interesting question. You almost sounded like some of our bosses who used to be asking this question. Is this a nice to have distraction? I would say, consumer tourism, all these kinds of words were thrown at me. I think all that is true. It could land up in that stage unless you are very careful. But the whole thing is, first you need the conviction that consumer centricity is essential for business to survive and grow and thrive and be loved by the consumer customers. That's the most important thing, right? You need to have a conviction. The second one is that when the consumer centricity program, my experience has been, you can see it, you can feel it in the organization. You don't have to ask anyone. You can see the conversations that are happening in the meetings when people are presenting, the brand managers are there. They are quoting from their own experience. I met this consumer and look at this is the way it happened. They would show pictures of the consumer meetings, or let's say some ethnographic pictures of their kitchen or their bathroom, or the product that they've used. I mean, it would come alive. You see the consumer is in the meeting through these kind of things. So that is one way of knowing. This is what Kate Derriset was telling me at the time, saying that I don't hear the conversation about consumers in our meetings. It's all about margins, products, costs, etc. Where is the consumer in this conversation? So I think this is the main thing you need to listen to. If you do all the activity and then still people are not bringing consumer into conversation, there's something which you're missing. You need to look at. In terms of level of implementation of the program, there could be some KPIs. Like, for example, I said 30,000 consumers. We had a global system of capturing this for Unilever as part of People Voice. We used to do 100,000 plus kind of thing, and we would keep track of it. That's to say that at least those connects are happening, etc. But to Priyanka's point, that kind of system which she talked about, we had introduced something called a consumer license, where if you are in a meeting, unless you have the license, you can't talk about the consumer because you have not understood the consumer enough. So why are you talking about that? So this came to a situation where some of the brand managers could not talk about their own brands because they had not done their connect. So they would rush out and say, because I used to get these messages saying that, can you organize connect for this thing? What's the hurry? No, I am not allowed to talk about my own brand in my meeting because I've not done this connect. So I think the consumer license became almost like a mandatory thing. It's like a driving license. You can't drive the car unless you have a license kind of thing. So 50 hours kind of thing, 100 hours, whatever was the thing based on various divisions of that thing. The other thing, the mindset is to look at is to understand, everybody in the company has to understand, there's only one boss, that's the customer. My boss in the organization is an intermediary boss. He gets his salary also from the customer. So unless we are all listening to the customer together, you may be in supply chain, you may be in finance, it doesn't matter. Your salary is coming from him. Please listen to that person. Yeah. So that's the mindset that has to come in. And then the attitude will start changing. Because people in the big organization are so remote, they don't know where that money is coming from for them. Unless they understand that if the guy stops paying, you are in trouble. Yeah. So the last one is to look at ideas. One of the things which I think Priyanka briefly referred to as well is to, in the meetings, we used to, after the Consumer Connect big sessions, workshops, we would have a session where we actually have managers coming up with ideas. What's the kind of ideas based on the issues which are on the table? And the idea generation would be, there's an idea bank which is to create. So that will then lead to giving you a sense of how things are going and how many ideas are implemented, gone to concepts and convert into. See, it is not all that all ideas will get converted, but even if 1 out of 100 ideas gets done, it's worth it because that will be a brilliant idea.
Right. No, thanks, Pradeep. What about you, Priyanka? Do you have something to add?
Sure. So, in fact, a lot of it is overlapping with what Pradeep did mention. I'd still like to share one example. I remember when I used to go to Flipkart as part of my Kantar Avatar, I used to go to Flipkart because I was servicing the account. There used to be this one chair in the meeting room which used to say customer. And every meeting room would have this one chair, okay? And everybody would at least pretend to be solving for that customer, for this person. I think we have come a very, very long way. No more those chairs exist in the meeting room anymore because the onus is on everybody to meet up the customer and be the voice of the customer. And the whole piece on the democratization of insights has actually helped in humanizing the customer, just like Pradeep mentioned. Otherwise you're always talking about V by UV, number of visitors, GMV, conversions, so on and so forth. What KYC and customer centricity programs have done within the organization is it has humanized a customer, that we are solving for a customer. It could be me, it could be somebody who's sitting in tier 2, maybe 5 degrees separate from me, but I still know that person through a lot of these KYC programs, right? And Pradeep
Right.
mentioned something very, 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 I would say, core to the entire customer centricity program, which is when you are in meetings and when you hear, okay, leaders talking about it, people talking about it, that, I present this to you because we heard it in the KYCs, we heard it from the customer. And, when there is an argument against something like that, and then you put in a customer point of view, nobody can ever, at least in my career, I've never seen anybody getting up and saying that I don't believe what the customer said. So the moment you
Yeah.
put it on the customer, because it's a customer insight, okay, it just has a different weightage altogether. So there are tangibles, and obviously, as tangibles, Pradeep has already mentioned, there are KPIs. We call it KYC certificates, etc. So those are KPIs. We do a comparison between employee voice surveys, which is we ask the employees how customer centric as an organization we are, and then there is an external, through BHT and NPS work, we do an external customer voice survey as well. And we map the two data points to see where the gap is. And we've been bridging
Right.
that gap, thankfully, over the period of years. So these are some of the tangibles that we also look at. But the main joy, Ruchika, comes from these anecdotal and these real life examples wherein customers get quoted in meetings when these arguments take place. That's when you
Yeah.
know that, you have won. The customer has won.
Right. Absolutely. I mean, a customer is not a chair or a physical object. Like you said, it's a human or she's a human. So it's best if it is there. So I think there are a few questions that have come up. So I'm going to go quickly into that. So one question which is from Anupam Kumar is, how do both companies categorize their customers? Because each customer, individual customer is unique in his point of view. So how do you categorize or segment them? Uh, and he wants to know as Flipkart or as Unilever.
Sure.
Go ahead, Priyanka. We want to say something.
Sure. Okay. I can go first on this. So, categorization is very, very important because it helps in providing the right solutions to the customer, whatever he or she is looking on the platform. While our end goal is to do categorization of n is equal to 1, but that is still far off. In the milestone that we are at, the customer gets segmented on various or classified on various aspects. It could be demographics, it could be psychographics, it could be current usership behavior, wherein whether how much of the share of wallet of the customer is online versus offline, what are some of the categories that the customer is more comfortable buying offline, and therefore what we should be showing him or her so that we are able to also get that part of the share of wallet of the customer. So as many different explicit or implicit personalization work that we do, we look at demographics, we look at psychographics, we look at the life stages, we look at the usership of the customers, and particularly the behavior that the customer exhibits on the platform. So multiple, all of them, I would say. We wouldn't say that I would go with one. We use all of them to be able to have a better understanding of the customer.
Sure.
Broadly, that's what we also do. I mean, basically, I do take it 3 dimensions. One is demographics, which is all to do with consumer profile, etc., in terms of age, income, family status, etc., life cycle stage. Then you look at the entire area of mindset in terms of certain categories or certain attitudes, like based on what level you want to measure it in terms of values and lifestyles. And the third one is behaviors itself in terms of what they are doing in terms of not just the purchase behavior, but in terms of the lifestyle behaviors. So we used to use a scale called the Living Standard Measure, LSM, which had worked on it from 2005 onwards. So globally, we have used it in Unilever. That captures some of aspects of this. But more importantly, in a consumer-centric program, those things help you to align your brands to the various target groups. But within a target group, you still have to be consumer-centric. You need to understand their aspects of their life which actually matter, where brands can help or business can help solve their problems and become an asset to the consumer rather than a liability.
Good. One question that's come up is, is customer centricity different among B2C audience and B2B audience? This is from Abraham KV. He's asking that. I think, both Pradeep, you and Priyanka have been largely speaking about B2C, but with your experience, what do you say in terms
I
of?
think that's a fair point. That's a fair point. It's the nature of how you engage may change, but the focus is the same. We used to use retailers as a B2B this thing. In fact, there was a complete parallel program. Like we had consumer industry, we had a program which one of Sanjeev Mehta, who started this, who is the CEO of HUL, started this when he was in the North Africa, Middle East area. Getting in touch with retailers as a way to get consumer connect and look at shopper behavior and interact with shoppers in the store. So there is, but at the end of it, what you need to do is, how do you keep the people, whether it's the customer, as we used to say about the retailers, or the consumer who's the end consumer of the product, you need to keep both of them in mind and see what their needs are and be able to solve their problems a little ahead of it becoming a crisis or it becoming serviced by somebody else. Then you lose that opportunity. So I think that is what this connection is about. So with both with retailers as well as consumers, we used to have programs.
Yeah,
Right.
I'll just add to that. So for us also, it is a retailer or basically anybody who's selling onto the platform becomes the B2B partner for us. What we have attempted to do internally is create an insights dashboard for the seller so that, whenever the customer is coming, shopping, there is scope to give ratings and reviews onto the product. Now, what we do is that this dashboard is able to analyze and present a narrative to the seller that, these kind of products or this format of the products or this quality of the product was being perceived by the customer in this way. So what was the kind of rating scales which were being used, and hence the rating and the reviews. So those reviews also get analyzed, and an analysis and the narrative is being shared with the seller so that the customer feedback goes to the B2B retailer so that it gives him a chance to improvise upon his products and services. So just another structured way of giving the insights, more customer-centric insights to the B2B.
Great. Thank you. So one last question, I think, because we are all one or two, let's see if I can manage. But one question that has come up is, has the pandemic made it necessary for for companies to be more customer centric? One, and also has it made it easier to adopt customer centricity programs? So, the impact of the pandemic, how has that been on this program?
I think for our businesses, especially talking from a Unilever perspective, as we have offline and online businesses as well. So I think the fact that we got distant because of the markets shutting down, etc., created a heightened awareness to actually digitally connect more, because that's the only way to keep our thing open. And the availability of tools. In fact, today's Hindustan Liver program and also Unilever program, if you look at how the digital connectivity has become a dominant way of connecting with consumers, whether it's video chats, whether it's group chats, even ethnography studies, where the lady is going shopping and talking to you as she goes shopping, or she's doing cooking and she's showing you through her smartphone, has become a way of looking at, because it eliminates some of the reasons which people give as to why they can't do. I don't have the budget for it. I don't have the travel budget to go to the consumer. I don't have the time. All these reasons will go away because it's on a mobile app. You can do it anytime. So it takes away all the reasons. So that created a step change in how teams will engage. So actually the pandemic helped to bolster up that connection. Now the task is, I was talking to Nitesh and he said that we need to get more face-to-face connects back, because there's a value in actually seeing the whole family and the consumer when you meet at home as compared to just on a face on the digital this thing. So yes, pandemic has brought ahead the importance of this, and you shouldn't be talking and operating a business in vacuum.
Yeah, I completely agree with what Pradeep has mentioned. We also feel that while pandemic accentuated the whole virtual connect with the customers, but the kind of design thinking that gets into action when you're talking to the customer face to face versus virtual, it's widely different. And from an e-commerce perspective, yes, the customer centricity further got accentuated, because the first 200 million customers for e-commerce is very different from the next 200 million, because first 200 million was far more male, more mobile, younger, more English, more metro. And now the next 200 million is more female, need not necessarily always be on mobile, maybe slightly higher on the age band, more vernacular, more non-metro, etc., so on and so forth. Hence, it became very important to understand their need gaps, their need states, etc. And hence, customer centricity has to evolve in terms of the form and format also that we are using while talking to this next set of customers on e-tail.
Yeah, thank you. I think that's all we have time for. So it was really very engaging, and I hope everyone online also enjoyed the session. Thank you, Pradeep. Thank you, Priyanka, for your inputs and your time. Really grateful. And I hope you liked being part of this session. And just before we...
Thanks, Ruchika. Thanks. It was wonderful being here.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for having us. Thank you.
Yeah, just one final thing. Like I mentioned earlier, MRSI has conducted 5 such sessions. So please check the MRSI homepage, which is mrsi.co.in, or LinkedIn page, to see the other upcoming live session and to also listen into some sessions that have happened in the past. So thank you and bye-bye. Have a good evening.
Thank you. Wish you the same. Bye-bye. Bye.
All the best. Bye.